and I'm going to start over. Okay, welcome tonight to the ASQ Innovation Division webinar, July webinar with Mr. Bryan Mattimore, and he is going to be talking about leading innovation culture transformation. You are in for a treat because our guest speaker tonight is the chief idea guy behind the Growth Engine Company, and he has a 20-year plus background in innovation and creativity. He has managed over 200 innovation projects, leading to over $3 billion in new sales, and he has worked with over 1/3 of the Fortune 100 companies. He has 3 best-selling books on ideation and innovation that you're not going to want to miss: The Idea Stormers, How to Lead and Inspire Creative Breakthroughs, and 21 Days to a Big Idea. He is a graduate of Dartmouth with a major in psychology and is also an innovation and marketing instructor for Caltech. You are in for a treat tonight with our speaker. So without further ado, I'm turning it over to Bryan to share with you his fun fact that you would not have read from his online bio.
Rhonda, are you going to share that fun fact? Or okay, I didn't even see the fun. Let's see what the fun fact is. I don't even know which one it is. So let's see here.
Anyone you want to share, Bryan.
Okay. Okay. So I guess the fun fact is when I got out of college and I was looking for a job in advertising, the fun fact was I created a promotional event called Jogging for Jobs. And we got national publicity on it, and we jogged to the top 36 New York City ad agencies over 3 days, dropping resumes off. I had gotten a bunch of other people to, quote, jog with me, and we all got jobs out of it. So that's my fun fact.
Love it. So talk about creativity and innovation in action. This is phenomenal. Thank you, and congratulations, by the way.
Yeah, well, I was fired 4 months after that, but that's okay. That led me to do a different career out of advertising, which was fantastic. Into new
You know what they say, when you get fired, it just means there's something better right around the corner for you, and I'm sure you.
And there was, so it was a blessing, actually. So, so welcome, guys. And Ron, do we have about an hour for this? Do we usually do like 10 minutes of questions at the end, or?
Anything you're comfortable with, we really leave it to the speaker. You could do interactive during your speaking if you wish, or you could do it at the end. And yes, we have about an hour, sir.
Okay, so maybe at the end, but if somebody is, just dying to ask me a question, they're afraid they'll forget it, just jump in. Here's some of my background. We heard all that, so we don't have to go much into that. The important point, I think, about my background is that the stuff that I'm going to share with you tonight is really based on, empirical evidence or real-world experience. And by the way, I know how difficult innovation culture transformation can be because I've been through so many of these, if you will, initiatives. And so what I'm going to share with you tonight is, the strategies that we found to be successful. Now, they're based on, as I said, empirical evidence, real-world experience, etc. And there's underlying theory behind them, if you will. But I'm going to spend more time tonight on the practical application of these things than trying to justify the approaches with theory. And so I'll set that up. I'll give a case study or two, and hopefully you'll have questions at the end that if I can, I'll be happy to answer. So here we go. So the framework that I want to share with you, and this is a little theoretical, but it's also, I think, extremely practical. We call it the Total Innovation Enterprise. And we've been sort of proposing this or proponents of this for the last really 20 years, 22 years since we started Growth Engine, my innovation agency. And this is the innovation framework that we think of. So as we go through this, you'll see, many of you or some of you may think of innovation as just new products, and of course it's not that. And so we're going to address that tonight. We've identified 10 innovation and TIE, or Total Innovation Enterprise Principles. And I want to share these just because one of the major recommendations that I'm going to make towards the end of this talk is the notion that values are critical to this work. And so I thought, well, let me just walk the talk a little bit here and very quickly just mention some of the principles that we think are part of a total innovation enterprise. The first one is obvious: an enterprise has unrealized innovative potential. And these should not be surprising. If they are, I'd be surprised. Obviously, innovation opportunities are everywhere, and they're even more now than there used to be. The point here again is this is not just in new products. You know, we feel strongly, and the books I've written, now 4 books with a 5th coming out this year. You know, creativity must be nurtured in each employee. It's not a given that the environment will promote and enable people to be creative, and yet they are. I mean, you know, I did some work with Con Ed soon after 9/11, and I went around and, you know, they, as you probably know, or if you don't know, if you're from New York, you probably know. If you're not, the Con Ed people, you know, did heroic efforts to restore power to Lower Manhattan after 9/11. And they, you know, they then asked me after this to address their group to talk about creativity and innovation. And frankly, I felt a little embarrassed, might even be the right word, because I'm sitting home watching TV, drinking Diet Cokes, and they're, you know, going to heroic efforts. And so I said, well, let me ride the trucks with your guys for a day. And they said, great. So I got a hard hat, went around. I'm looking for steam leaks and Rockefeller Center, and, you know, I met, you know, 14 or 15 people, did in-depth interviews, and this was life-changing for me, and that's why I'm spending some time talking about it. I said, well, you know, the first question was the Drucker question: what's one thing you would change, right? But the second question was for me, and it was, what are you most proud of? And what they said, and this is all of them, everyone I talked to, they all brought up an instance where they had, you know, proposed an idea, and that idea was accepted. And it could have been as simple as, you know, get cell phones to our guys on the, you know, driving around here, because we need to stay in touch with, you know, both the home office and the consumers. So that was important for me, that, you know, the creativity is there, and frankly, people want to exercise that creativity. And I think that it's incumbent on the organization to create an environment that, you know, encourages and releases that. Yeah. Number 4, obviously, ideas are important. You know, it's have ideas or die, right? This is important. This notion of a higher order vision liberates growth potential. You know, people, especially in these times, want to feel that their work has meaning, and it's really important for the leadership to identify those higher order values to the world, so that people can feel good about committing themselves to that work. And this gets now to some of the practicality. When we go into an organization, we don't say, okay, we're going to do a study now and come back to you and recommend this particular innovation process, and this will create a culture of transformation and innovation. Frankly, that's the last thing we do. We want to work, if you will, from the bottom up. And we often tell the organization, you know, give us an underperforming division or an overperforming division, but let's work with a division and help them be more innovative in all aspects, which I'll talk about in a second. And in that process, we are going to understand your business more than we do now, even though we've worked in pretty much every industry now. But we don't have the ego to presume that they're, you know, we know their industry nearly as well as they do, or their customers, et cetera. And so it's our way of understanding their business and their industry and their challenges, helping them be innovative and solve those challenges. And in the process, then we build the quote culture transformation innovation process from the bottom up. And this notion of pockets of passion is critical, because you want, you know, you want to build on those successes, right? You know, when my dad was an entrepreneur at Time Incorporated, Time Life, he created a division for them, a research company called SAMI. It became the second largest research firm in the nation. Well, because it was growing so rapidly, it created such excitement at Time Life that, you know, guys who were in the, you know, in the media business said, oh, I want to be part of that, which was amazing because it was a research firm, right? And so pockets of passion have their own reward in that they will help change the, you know, they will sort of build on successes. Number 7, ideas drive attitudinal and cultural change. That's, again, I think somewhat obvious, but you know, ideas is, you know, ideas is the way to get there. It's not slogans, it's not management fads, it's ideas that'll be the driver of change, right? Multidisciplinary teams, again, this is, I think, almost self-evident. There's been a tremendous amount of research that says multidisciplinary teams are the way to go when you're trying to innovate something new, right? And so, and there are 2 reasons. One, you want all that different expertise, number 1, but number 2, when it comes time to both do that idea, to innovate the idea, to make a success, if a finance guy was part of your original team, he's going to be on board and be able to support it politically when it's brought to the board or however it gets funding. It's all about implementation. One of the important takeaways from, I think, all my work, and you know, we are world-class, he says humbly, but we are world-class in ideation process, sort of team creativity, you know, and so, you know, a number of my books have been about, you know, which techniques will have the greatest chance of success against different kinds of challenges. So the 2 products, you know, you'll use a semantic intuition technique. If it's cost cutting, mind mapping would work well for that. If it's insight work you're trying to get, you know, then you know, collaging, etc. But you know, that's even for the first idea, you know, or the eureka moment, the big idea. But then, as many, if not most of you on the call know, that first idea, while it may not have been easy, the hard part is bringing it to market and getting, you know, the funding and figuring out if it's a new product, the package and the positioning, et cetera, et cetera. And so the point here is that all my work and all the ideation processes is not just about coming up with the quote big idea. It's about being creative at every stage of the process. So if you're trying to get the board to, allot and fund a $10 million new factory, you can use these techniques to come up with creative ideas to get them on board. Okay, so that's an important point, and that gets back to the theme of it's all about implementation. And then finally, outside partners are an important source of new ideas, and this is becoming even more important now with the rate of change, right? And these could be certainly customers. We do a fair amount. We have a program we call TradeLink. We do a fair amount of projects where, if it's in the packaged goods world, we will co-create with Walmart or Kroger. You know, we'll go down to Bentonville or we'll go out to Cincinnati and co-create ideas with their buyers. And so, you know, and we can get these buyers for 2.5 and 3 hours, which if you, you know, which is an incredible achievement. But the thought here is if they are part of the process, they are much more likely to manifest this thing, right? And also you can co-create with suppliers, right? You know, there's been tremendous work done now by BCG that CEOs, you know, they spend, I think about 7% of their time with suppliers, and yet suppliers, you know, they're paying 50% of the revenue to these suppliers. So anyway, the notion is you want to co-create with these partners. Okay, so let's get into it now, which is now that we've got these principles established, it's important, I think, to recognize, accept, however you want to think about it, that there really, or at least we think of it this way, that there are 2 kinds of innovation. Innovating for growth, as we call it, and then efficiency or process innovation. And they're very different, you know, politically, how you organize for them, you know, the techniques you would use, et cetera. So if we're innovating for growth, you can see, what do we have, 2, 5, like 9 of these things. all of these would be areas where you're trying to grow, right? And you're using investment dollars to grow the brand, to grow the division, to grow the company, et cetera. And so this is the classic way we think about innovation, right? All these areas. But equally important, I don't know, it's an interesting question, but certainly very important is also efficiency and process innovation, right? Because, the guys on the line can come up with an idea that could save the company tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. Unilever, this was many years ago, many years ago, we were hired by Unilever to go to, we ran 25 ideation sessions on cost cutting around the country at all their factories and all their district offices, et cetera. And that work generated $50 million worth of savings. Well, so that's a lot, because that'll go right to the bottom line, right? So all these areas are obviously possible for efficiency and process innovation. And again, you have to organize differently for those. So let's get into this. Again, this is my JFK quote, probably the quote I feel, if I had to pick a business quote to put on my tombstone, A, I won't have a tombstone because I'll be cremated, but B, and B, I won't have a business quote. But this is kind of the favorite quote I've ever created, because it's so critical, in my opinion, about how you really do innovation. And if you don't innovate by changing the culture, which is, I think, how 90% of firms do it. Yeah, we're going to tell you how to do it, and here's a process, and ta-da, and there you go, right? No, we feel strongly that you change the culture by innovating. Again, this gets to the pocket of passion stuff, the idea that you want to innovate, again, from the bottom up, and use that, and it's a terrible analogy now, but almost like a benevolent virus, and have that spread throughout the organization for excitement and interest. So again, that's innovating from the bottom up. All right, so how do you do this, right? Come on, how are you going to make this happen? Well, I do think there should be certain skill sets that your organization may have, but it might not. First of all, you need commitment from senior management. If you don't have commitment from senior management, it's going to be a really tough slog, or at least the divisional president. It may not be the CEO, but you want a leader who is committed to innovation, because it's hard. And if you don't have that support, it's going to be a tough slog. And you may, if you really want to be innovative, you may want to go to a different company, right? But I think that all leaders in these times need to be, quote, facilitating leaders. These are the notion that they would champion the use of ideation. It gets back to what? This notion that everybody's creative and you want to leverage that creativity. And again, you can use this for growth or for process or improvement, but there should be a supporter. This facilitating leader should be facilitating the acceptance, promotion, and funding of new ideas, right? And new innovations, okay? The facilitating leader, these are all areas where the facilitating leader could have a role, right? And if you're looking for a job title, maybe that would work for you, the facilitating leader, right? And so these are all areas where that leader can really help, right? And of course, we're going to focus tonight on culture change, but all of these are something that the facilitating leader could or should be part of, all right? So what about culture change? I wrote a piece last year for a book, what's the title of that? Oh, The Other Side of Growth was the title of the book. And the whole notion here was that if you really want to get a culture of transformation, in my humble opinion, besides working from the bottom up, finding pockets of passion, if you need to work from the top down, my bias is that you should start with the values. And of course, Zappos is, I think, the poster child for the importance and success of that. You know, before Tony Hsieh died, you know, when he sort of took over the helm at Zappos, they were not doing well, and they spent over a year getting their values straight or created, and they did that by polling all the employees, putting it together, getting the language right. And so these are, you know, Zappos's values. And they're obviously, as you know, they were bought by Amazon, I think it was over 10 billion, and they are absolutely world-class in terms of customer experience, right? But I think the reason I brought them up is because if you look at their values, and this is true, I think, of every organization on the planet. I've yet to find an organization that doesn't have this. You know, it's all about creativity, change, open-mindedness, pursuing growth and learning, and the last one, creating fun and a little weirdness. I know of no organization that doesn't have at least one of their values around change and growth, okay? So if you're looking to be a change agent within your organization, to me, this is permission, right? This is permission in your established values to say, hey, look at this. This is one of our 5, by the way, I think 10 is too many, but this is one of our 5 or 7 values. Are we really, you know, aligned, and are these values really important to us? Because if they're not, maybe I'll leave, but if they are, come on, let's go. You know, so to me, there's a fire truck. Okay, we're all right. So to me, this is permission for you as a change agent to pursue this innovation culture mindset, okay? So I want just a real world experience. We're working with a large real estate firm, and we help them with their mission, vision, and values. By the way, if you need to redo this in your own organization, you know, the mission and visions should be the purview, in my opinion, of the CEO and his or her leadership team. But the values, again, not unlike Zappos, I think should come from the employees. And the way we did this program, we elicited literally hundreds and hundreds of values. We then bucketed them. And so one is we got the themes, and then, of course, it's key to have the language, right, to get the language right. So anyway, one of this company's values was be a pioneer, right? And so how do you make this, you know, come alive? It's off the wall now. You know, this is not a plaque on the wall. This is a vehicle for culture change. And so one of their 7 values was be a pioneer. So how did they activate that? Well, for one, they had a newsletter. And I love this. Each month, they would champion a different value, right? And this month happened to be a pioneer. The second thing is they would share examples of how this value was reflected in employee behavior. And by the way, just as a side note, we ran a whole bunch of ideation sessions with the people in this organization to be creative about how they would translate a value to their job, number one, and number 2, how it would change their behavior. And this is at every level of the organization, right? Every level of the organization. So if he's the custodian, okay, well, how does be a pioneer affect your job as the custodian? And what might you do differently? And let's help you be creative about how you reflect that notion of be a pioneer, okay? Lunch and Learns was something they did. The other thing is the HR manager, who was, you know, very evolved and wonderful, would find TEDx talks that inspired people, or TED Talks, excuse me, and TEDx Talks too, that would inspire people around this notion of be a pioneer, right? It's wonderful. And then finally, they would share books that people might read, all right? So this was a way to really, you know, make this real, right? That's the point. It's a way to make this real. And you can imagine how positive an effect this would have on every single employee in the company, because it sends the message, again, we want you to be pioneers. We want you to be creative, because that's the future of our organization. Okay, back to this notion of the facilitating leader. You can see, you know, focused ideation. By the way, what's focused ideation? Dear God, that's an oxymoronic term, and you'd be absolutely correct. So let me just take a quick excursion. Hopefully it's quick. I mean, I could spend 3 days talking about this, but we have coined this term focused ideation, right? And so what is that? The notion is that you can direct your ideation to get better results than if it weren't directed. And you direct it with specific techniques that are known to work, you know, in a particular area. Again, I mentioned this before, cost cutting versus new products versus whatever, number one. And then also you can customize those techniques with specific stimuli. The point here is that you're not brainstorming because many of you, I'm sure, are not big fans of brainstorming, and nor you should be. Classic brainstorming, right? You know, the notion of, you know, withhold judgment and a lot of ideas will equal good ideas. Those are important principles. They shouldn't be walked away from. They're absolutely true. But what separates ideation from brainstorming is triggering the brain in different ways. So you don't go in, you know, we did work for Oreo and Chips Ahoy cookies. Well, those cookies, Oreo's been around for over 100 years. If we go in there like a brainstorming session and say, hey, who's got some ideas for Oreo cookies, which is how you do brainstorming, right? They should throw us out of the room because, you know, they've been thinking about that for 100 years. They don't need us to ask that question. We, in turn, would trigger them with all kinds of stimuli, trends, customer wishes, you know, desserts, semantic intuition combination techniques, and on and on and on. Okay, so it's not, and you may have guessed there's a one-word answer here, ideation versus brainstorming. It's all about what? It's all about the triggering or the stimuli, right? So it's about triggering the brain, and this is triggering different parts of the brain, right? And so let's talk about that. We've identified 4 different kinds of ideation techniques: questioning techniques, metaphorical techniques, visual techniques, and fantasy techniques. So what are some of these? And by the way, I realize this may feel a little bit like a fire hose, but my hope is that you'll be inspired to learn more and to become a facilitating leader and do the research. You know, you can read my books or other people's books, it doesn't matter, but you'll see that there's a whole world of ideation process that's been developed since the invention of brainstorming in the late 1930s by Alex Osborne. You know, what are we, 100 years, well, 90 years later here, and there's been tremendous advances in how you help people get ideas. And my book, Ideastorm, is a really good example of that one. But there are others, Thinker Toys and other books. So, all right, so we've got 4 different kinds of ideation techniques we've identified. Questioning techniques, here are our 3 favorites. These are particularly good for strategy, for framing the challenge correctly, you know, problem redefinition, make sure you're solving the right problem. We use that problem redefinition one to help an insurance company increase their sales by 52% just by redefining how they thought about, you know, what they were offering. Then there's metaphor principle transfer techniques. This was pioneered by synectics, 2 guys, George Prince, and I'll remember his name shortly, who actually I knew and was a friend. These guys created synectics, and their notion was that you want to do principle transfer, right? And it's brilliant work. And so these are, you know, a half dozen of the techniques that are around metaphor and principle transfer. If you have an engineering firm, you may know the TRIZ principles. I was fortunate to be able to review the TRIZ methodology when it came to the U.S. for Success Magazine in the invention machine. And, you know, again, if you're in the engineering world, this is powerful stuff. We use these as triggers in our sessions when we're trying to invent new engineering approaches or new products in the engineering field. That the genesis of that, Gerald Altshuler, he was a Russian in the 50s, and he had his team analyzed 200,000 patents, and from that they identified 40 key invention principles. And if you know, there's a book out there, TRIZ for Dummies, et cetera, et cetera. But again, the notion here, and I don't expect you to get all this, I know it's a bit of a fire hose, But or I'll just mention patent prompts. We created that technique when the the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office made their patents searchable by keywords. And so if we had a challenge where we're trying to, invent a new fuse box, which we were for Eaton Corporation, we then pulled out patents that were about, transfer or interrupting or facilitating or current flow or whatever. And of course, you get patents when you use those keywords in hundreds of different areas. And the point here is then you look at those patent abstracts and transfer those principles to invent a new fuse box, as we did. Okay, and then visual techniques. These are great. We use mind mapping for cost cutting, positioning continuums. I may not have time to talk about this, even though it's in the presentation. Collaging. We were working with Procter & Gamble, and we used collaging to help get insights into what people, women thought about hair coloring. And so we had them do before and after collages, unbelievably powerful. Before it looked like Armageddon, afterwards, these collages were, running through the fields, singing and dancing. And that led to the Great Solutions product for them, long-lasting, great coverage. But the point is that these visual techniques will be triggering different parts of the brain and can be used in different ways. And then finally, fantasy techniques. These are really fun. Wishing, role-playing of great thinkers, coming up with bad ideas and then flipping them, silly ideas. We helped the ASPCA, and build a national campaign to get people to adopt abuse pit bulls using the silly idea, et cetera. And if you want more stories on this, I'm happy to share them at the end here. But I want to keep going because I want to make sure you get the overview of what I'm saying here. I thought I would take a specific example just so this doesn't, again, seem overly theoretical. And I think it's a really good example. In some ways, I think it's a prototypical example, at least it is for us, in the world of strategy implementation, okay? So here's the example. IBM, this was probably in the late 90s, early 2000s. I've forgotten the exact dates. But anyway, they came to us and said, hey, listen, we've got a new division. It's called the ISC, Integrated Supply Chain Division. And it was formed overnight, literally, and it has 19,000 employees formed overnight. What it was they took all their supply chain and logistics and purchasing people and took them out of their silos, and so they weren't buying for mainframes or PCs or whatever, and put them all in one division, right, to get efficiencies and ideas. And so they came to us and said, we got this new 19,000 employee division. All our efforts at building culture with them and building an innovation culture, they're not really working. We have a really good strategy. We've identified 4 pillars of our strategy. But, we get the divisional president to go on and they'll do webinars. And, we're giving talks and we're holding, get-togethers all the way. And it's kind of just not working. Their impulse, pulse surveys internally said people were still identifying with their previous silo or previous division and not sort of getting the come together that IBM was looking for. And so they said, could you help us with that? And it's like, we said, as consultant, we said, sure, but this was hard, right? I mean, this is a difficult challenge. And, but we went back to our principles and we decided we would innovate from the bottom up, and we came up with a simple 3-step process. And this is, we sort of did a hierarchical multi-level marketing, if you want to call it, approach. And so this is what we did. Actually, let me back. What we did was we identified 28 high potentials, great communicators, knew the organization, great people, enthusiastic, et cetera, et cetera. We brought them into Armonk or Somers, wherever it was, and we had to train them for 3 days on how to facilitate a process with a total of 2,200 managers, all right? And this is what we had them look at for those 2,200 managers. What does our ideal future look like? Okay, so that's sort of a corporate question, right? And this is the key difference here. And how would your world be different based on this ideal future? That's the key question. What we wanted to do and what we did was we personalized this, right? So that people understood that they had to reinvent their own futures, right? And so that's what this was a 4-hour workshop that we had these managers lead. And we kept it really simple, right? And these were the 3 questions. So what would that future look like? What are some barriers? And then what are some, and this was another key, what are some cross-functional initiatives? Because what? We want to build a culture to overcome these barriers. And those 3 simple questions, they were facilitated by these 2,200 managers with 30 people in a meeting at a time. And then ultimately, the next level was there was a 2-hour thing with all 19,000 employees. So all 19,000 employees were able to be, quote, infected by this notion of how would my world be different and how do I reinvent my job? And so, and by the way, they, when we did the debrief after this initiative was done, we found that the pulse surveys went through the roof. They loved it. But more importantly, the single biggest thing we knew it had succeeded was because people were sitting in the cafeteria with different people from, quote, other areas, right? And so that's when we knew we had it. Anyway, so again, the point here is working from the bottom up, being creative about it, and making it personal, right? Okay. Again, we're getting this notion of the facilitating leader. Somebody has to lead this, right? And again, maybe that's you who's on the call. I'm not sure I'm going to have time to go through positioning continuums. I'll just mention this was something we created for one of our design clients, and the notion, and now we've used it for the Unilevers and P&Gs of the world, but the notion here was that you want to identify certain ends of a continuum and say where are we, right? And so this is a good kind of level set about where we are, and this is particularly good if you want to come up with a strategy or positioning for a product or for the division or whatever. You kind of say where are we relative to the competition, and you see we have 2 ends of the to continuum here, 2 ends, right? And so and you just make these up. If we're a design firm, are we a boutique or are we full service? Are we international or are we local, et cetera, et cetera? Okay, and then you just say, where do we want to move to relative to the competition? And from that, that's your strategic plan. And the reason I'm mentioning this from a culture change standpoint, this is an extremely simple but unbelievably powerful way for the whole organization to help you understand how you want to change culturally from an innovation standpoint, but also what's your priorities once you've decided that, right? And everybody can sort of be pulling together. Okay. And again, I mentioned mind mapping as a vehicle for changing, for cost cutting, for instance. The whiteboard technique is a technique, initially we did it in person, then we're doing it virtually, now we're back to doing it in person. And the idea of this is a way to build, again, working from the bottom up, build culture change. We get back to one of our principles, which is what? Everybody is creative and everybody wants to be creative. And so this unbelievably simple technique, we were asked by one of our clients to, essentially it was invented better suggestion box program because as you may or may not know, it's been one of the greatest failures in American business is suggestion box programs. In part, now there are exceptions. Some of our clients, Frito-Lay, Dart Industries, et cetera, have done well with them because their follow-up and rigor is great. But in general, they're not done well. And the reason is, number one, the ideas are not get a chance to be built on. You take an idea, put it in this black hole, and nobody gets to build on it. Ideas need to be built on, number one. And number two, the follow-up tends to be less than great, right? So this whiteboard technique, the way it works, and this works both from a growth standpoint and an efficiency standpoint, right? You as a manager of your team can say, okay, how do we cut costs in my group by 10%? And you put a whiteboard up. Hopefully you're back in person. But again, you can do it virtually. There are, mind map programs you can do virtually. It's much better in person. But anyway, you put this thing up, and then like a guy who plays a violin in the subway system in New York City, he puts out his violin case, puts some money in there, so people know they can put money in. You want to put your challenge in there. You want to put a few ideas or questions or factoids around it. And then at the bottom of this thing, you decide how many days you want the team to work on it. Usually it's 7 to 10. And you encourage everybody, water cooler time, when you're walking by, just write some ideas down. This is, oh my God, is this unbelievably simple or what? It is. And we have found it to be, in some companies, it's not worked well. Not sure why. In other companies, it's been gangbusters. We had one of our clients, I can mention, it was Armor All. They were trying to invent a new package of all things. This guy put a whiteboard in the lunchroom, talked about what he was after, and said, oh, by the way, I'll give you, I'll take you out to lunch if you win. And this whiteboard over like 10 days just filled up. It was like filled to the brim with all these packaging ideas. Some people had gone out and bought packages that would be similar, take them to the whiteboard, et cetera, et cetera. And from that, they got the 2 winning ideas, one of which was ultimately launched. What did that cost them? Lunch, right? Number one. And number two, even more important, I think, was this notion of culture change and working together to come up with ideas. And by the way, you could use the results of that and it's important to know if you're going to do this, and this I think is maybe why with some organizations it hasn't worked as well. But the city of New York this has been gangbusters with the mayor's office and training and development, et cetera, et cetera. But you want to make sure that there's some action that comes out of this. In other words, you've got all the people put all these ideas down, and you could write back and say, these are the 2 we're going to do, or you're going to say, this is great. We're going to use all your ideas for a research study, or we're going to do an ideation session and use these ideas you came up with to trigger the group, et cetera, et cetera. So this is, talk about simple and talk about working from the bottom up, but leveraging the notion and principle of getting everybody involved. It's to me wonderful because it helps the organization, and it's tremendously valuable from a culture building standpoint to get everybody involved in the creation of ideas. Okay, I'm not going to spend much time on this, obviously, in these times of virtual. I just want to know that if you're tasked with doing ideation virtually, I've written an article. I've got the link to the article on the slide at the bottom there. About halfway through COVID, I wrote this article. We had been asked to do strategy sessions virtually, and frankly, I wasn't sure how well it would work, but it worked really well. And it turns out there are actually some advantages to virtual, besides not having to travel and not dying. One of the advantages is we had a 2-day strategy session for a plastics firm, and so what we did, we broke, and you can't do it all day, right? Virtually ideation. So we broke it up into 4 3-hour sessions over 4 weeks. And it was great because we do a session and we'd have soak time to re-engineer, reinvent, restructure session 2, right? Which is we do that on the fly in a 2-day thing, but it's harder. And then, when you do it over 4 days, you get soak time. People get to think about it. The other advantage, which I hadn't anticipated, but which was really powerful, is you can invite different people to be at the session, different parts of the session. So some people you want there for all 4 of them, but you may have a packaging engineer or whatever you only want for 1 of the 3-hour sessions. Now, if he had flown in from Israel to be part of your 2-day strategy session, what are you going to say? We only want you for 3 hours? No, he has to be there. He or she has to be there for 2 days. So this was a way to really engineer the cross-functionality of these 4 sessions that we may not have been able to do nearly as successfully if they're in person. Okay, so that's what I want to share with you. These are some of the resources. These are some of my books. Islands of Invention will come out in a couple of months. That's a book on, I've written it with a McKinsey consultant from Denmark, Klaus Rausted. This is on how to create extraordinary innovation centers. That'll come out in September, October. And these are some of my other books. And you can see them there. And these are all available online. Just the idea term is just so you know, that's sort of the master work on ideation process and 21 days to a big idea. I wrote for current and aspiring entrepreneurs a process they could go through to, you know, to get big ideas. And so we've created a course now on this book for NACCE, which is National Association of Community College Entrepreneurship, in order to get, you know, young entrepreneurs to get more and better ideas for their entrepreneurial ventures. Okay, and then here are just some free resources, different articles, you know, on fostering creativity in the workplace, et cetera, Fast Company stuff, and you can see all those. And again, the links are all there for those. I guess I would just end, you know, I talk here about the HR facilitating leader. Obviously, it doesn't have to be HR. One of the reasons I mentioned HR is because we just did a course for Caltech that's going to, it's called the Future Skills Academy, and we did the innovation frameworks and ideation processes. And I mentioned this because it's for SHRM, and in September, SHRM will be making it available. That's the Society of Human Resource Management. They'll be making it available to their 360,000 global members. But, you know, obviously the point is you don't have to be in HR. I mean, you could be, you know, the Chief Innovation Officer. You could be, frankly, in training and development. You could certainly be in strategy. All of these areas, I think, you could adopt the role of being, quote, the facilitating leader. And this is a case where you may not want to ask for permission. You may just want to do it. Okay, so, all right, we finished at 7:48. I wanted to make sure I had a chance for you guys to ask questions. So can I get rid of the slides here?
Thank you so much, Bryan. And just let's give a big round of applause for our speaker and our topic that's, I think, so timely and so relevant and so useful in so many different cases of an organization's life cycle, especially as they grow and morph and move with the need. Let's see. I think we had a couple people tell us that, they've been tagged IT for implementing an innovation project, and they really need help with gauging that way forward. They may not know the level of innovation readiness, they may not have a toolbox, and they may not have a cultural approach down pat yet. What could you advise?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to that, right? I mean, you know, the frame of the innovation challenge is critical, right? And this is, it sounds easy, but it's not. The example I would give, we were asked by an ironing company to help them invent new irons, right? And we said, but we don't want to frame the challenge that way. We want to frame it, because there's so many assumptions about an iron, we want to frame it as how do you invent new anti-wrinkle devices? And actually, we frame it even broader than that. How do you invent new garment care devices? But the point here is that there's so many assumptions that are brought in to an innovation challenge that it's worth it spending quite a bit of, or some time at least, making sure you're framing the challenge correctly. Now, how do you do that? One is you can go talk to people. You can question the assumptions. That's a tremendous way to, you know, to identify very specifically what your innovation challenge is. You know, we work with, colleges and universities and nonprofits and city governments and all. And, they come to us with impossible innovation challenges. Now, what does that mean? They've been asked to cut costs by 10%, downsize their team by, getting rid of 2 people, and they got to get it done by a week from Friday. And, so it's this impossible innovation challenge. And the way they've defined it is, they're absolutely correct. It is impossible. But the way to get there is to question the assumptions you're making about that challenge. And so, you may have assumed we have to do all the work. Well, maybe we can get volunteers out, to do it. Or, we have to assume we have the money, but maybe you get Cisco to give you money or whatever it is. So that's one thought, is making sure you're framing it correctly. Number 2, we got to make sure that we have support, air cover from somebody who has money and power and influence. What else? I think also you want to manage expectations and be clear about what the deliverables are, what the metrics are. How do you define success? We worked with one company, we created for them the DIG team, the Disruptive Innovation Group, and the notion that we would generate $100 million brands, products, using new technology, et cetera, et cetera. Well, when we got into this work, we discovered the organization really didn't want disruptive ideas. Why? Because they're really hard to come up with really breakthrough disruption ideas, number 1. But number 2, they're going to disrupt the organization, frankly. And so you may need a skunkworks team to actually pull that off. So if you can define up front what your goals are, that'll determine how you approach it. If it's a more, if you don't have to be disruptive and get first mover advantage and higher margins and all that kind of stuff, and you can distribute, if it's a product, through your current distribution system and you under your current brands, et cetera, then you may the challenges may be less, and therefore the metrics may be achievable, right? So this is a long answer, but it's not an easy question, right? But I do think that if you can sort of both know what you're working on and know where you want to end up, those are the 2 points I'm making here, then you can build around that, working from where you are, but also where you expect you'll be is probably a good way to think of it, I hope.
I love it. No, that's perfect, right? We kind of get the 1, 2, 3, think about the different ways you can implement it, and you gave us so many different tools and approaches tonight. Thank you, Bryan. We have Kira Carmody who says, our company, like most, is in a constant state of change. Do you have any advice for making improvements in this kind of environment where people may be fed up of, with change efforts or having some change resistance?
Yeah, I mean, there are different kinds of change. I mean, one is a change of a CEO or management change. I mean, we got a call, from one of our clients the other day, and they said, we know you've done work on these particular brands, and we heard they were very successful. Might you help us on this other brand? And we said, yeah, but we've already done that work. They said, what are you talking about? We said, a year ago, we did unbelievable new product work for this brand. And so, go find the files or we'll send them to you, because frankly, we had already done the work. So the point here is sometimes because turnover can be so rapid in organizations from a personnel standpoint, they don't know what the organization has done. For one of our clients, our Gary Fraser, my business partner with Growth Engine, he's almost the brand historian. And they asked him to actually brief the agency, the new agency, because he had been with the brand longer than most of the people in the organization. So that's one component, right, of just management change. In terms of other changes, like I think what I'm hearing, and maybe I'm reading into this, but it's the flavor of the month. We are now this, and we are now, be bold, or, innovate, innovate faster, all these, sort of corporate, slogans and initiatives and programs and all the rest. And I guess my recommendation is, nod and say fine, but, be guerrilla-like and work with your team to identify where you're going, what you want to accomplish. And I hate to say it, but leverage what they're saying, but at times you may have to disregard it. And, because innovation can be hard and you're challenging the status quo, and you have to be really creative and politically crafty in order to pull this off. But I'm hoping that for the person who asked this question, behind it all, that they really want to do something. I mean, they're there and they want to achieve something great. And to do that, you're gonna run into challenges, and you have to be creative. Well, one of our clients, they had a wonderful new product, but it was a male-oriented organization, and these were two women, a woman marketer and a woman engineer. And what they did was so clever. They do little market research studies, and they do all this testing, and they knew they had a winner, and they would just report back good news to the organization. And finally, when there was a gap in the launch calendar, the senior manager said, "Hey, I've heard good things about their product. Maybe we should launch that." And when they did, it became the best-selling new product they had launched in 10 years. The point is that hopefully you're motivated to create successes, and that you're crafty and sly and politically astute enough to get around. I'm making a joke, sort of, but let's say to leverage what the organization is telling you to do without pissing too many people off.
I love it, Bryan. So you really talked, about so many things: the resistance, the politics, the different methodologies, the ways you can go about this. But I think one of the things you really said is, that innovation readiness for those who might just be starting out on their journey. I know you shared with us kind of some tools about strategy implementation. Is there some methodology or tool or way that you found best to really gauge this innovation readiness at the culture level or the leadership level?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's not an easy question because for me, I take a very unscientific view of this, which your audience may not like. But, for me, it's about finding the talent and finding the pockets of passion. Because if you get a talented innovator, that person is going to figure it out. So it's the, getting the right people on the bus, whatever you want to call it. To me, it's about finding that talent, and then if you're the leader, doing everything you can to help them succeed. I didn't really answer your question, Rhonda, but one way to assess innovation readiness is what have they done in the last year? Have they done anything? If they haven't done anything, you got a big challenge on your hand, and maybe you want to start sort of slower and build on some incremental successes. Because if you try to do, build a new platform or, go beyond incremental innovation, it's probably going to fail. So you have to build up the skills and the talents. And so I would say start small, get some wins, both from the standpoint of, launching new products or whatever, but also from the standpoint of, saving money and efficiency. Because the wonderful thing about the efficiency work is that you can start generating money and people are going to notice, and you can maybe steal some of that for, some of the new product initiatives. So the short answer is, I don't know, but start small with pockets of passion. And I guess you can look at the history too.
Yes, I love it. This is perfect, and I think a great answer to each of us, right? Each of both the entrepreneurs, and innovators across all scopes and scale of organizations that may be here tonight. Another big round of applause to our guest speaker, Mr. Bryan Mattimore, and just the wisdom, experience, tools, and methodologies that we can harness to make our organizations and ourselves more innovative. For those who are attending, we are so thankful for your attendance tonight, and we welcome you back to My ASQ Innovation TC. That's our centralized portal where you can engage with us, learn more about Mr. Bryan Mattimore, his work, as well as engage in a discussion on the topic matter. We also offer you insights on excellence through ASQE, which is really a roundtable type of workshop that explores digital transformation and innovation from a global perspective. If you're not part of ASQ or ASQE to date, we welcome each of you to join us on that journey, and we invite you to our next two webinar events on 8/26, Busting the Myths of Business Model Innovation with Dr. Sniukis, and on September 23rd at noon with Why the 21st Century Requires Collaboration, Innovation, and a New Style of Leadership with Dr. Bettina von Stam. So again, we thank our wonderful guest speaker, Bryan Mattimore. We thank each of you for your attendance tonight, and we welcome you back to our next discussion and webinar on 8/26. ASQ Innovation TC out. Mr. Bryan Mattimore, I think you want a closing word here.
Yeah, I do, Rhonda. I would just say, this was very much a fire hose, and I apologize for that. But I want you, all the listeners, to feel free. If you have any questions or anything that's really bugging you and you'd like to just talk about it, I'm more than happy to do that. And the quid pro quo is you just have to tell me how it worked out. That's all. So
we love it. Yeah. So we have your deck, Bryan, and we'll post it, and we'll make sure we start the discussion. I'll make sure that we're putting it out in our newsletter and that we're inviting people to share their innovation challenge with you. And we're so grateful for your continued support and your engagement with our community. So all of you have a wonderful evening, have a wonderful rest of your summer, and we look forward to be joining you on 8/26. Thank you so much.